Hey everybody, it's Elisa. We are back, and this time we're going to start looking at the nephron. There's a lot of them in your kidneys. So each kidney has about 1.2 million nephrons, and each one of them has some principal parts. Two important ones are going to be the corpuscle and the tubule. So the corpuscle is the roundish part where we're actually starting to kind of filter out the blood plasma, and the renal tubule itself is going to be these long, the proximal convoluted tubule and the distal convoluted tubule, and they're going to actually like complete the filter of what we've extracted in the corpuscle region into actual like urine. So the renal corpuscle consists of the glomerulus, like think of globe, right? Like a globe, right? For glomerulus, and a two-layer glomerular Bowman's capsule, which is going to just kind of like cover it. And we'll look at this in a little bit. The outer layer is going to have a simple squamous epithelium. Kind of standard like lining type epithelium. And then the visceral inner layer has these really cool cells called podocytes, like think of like feet cells, footed cells that are wrapped around the capillaries of the glomerulus. And we'll take a look at this in person. Ah, look how pretty that looks. Okay. The glomerular capsule itself. So this is, think of the globe, the glomerulus globe. Oops, there it is. Okay, the glomerulus globe. And here is the blood flow that's coming in, right? So we're coming in. And once we get in there, we have this layer of cells, these podocytes, and see how it looks like these little, like, kind of palm, like leaf looking feet? Yeah, so they wrap around all of these arteries, and what they do is they kind of squish out all of the, like the blood plasma, essentially. And then that blood plasma is going to be kind of sucked into this region, right? And we're going to go to the proximal convoluted tubule, right? And then, of course, here's like the outside part that we were talking about here. And capsular space, right? Capsular space is that space between the podocytes that are wrapping around those little arteries and the outer glomerular capsule itself. So, right. That's some neat stuff. Okay, so let's follow this track. So the vascular pole is the site of the corpuscle where the afferent arteriole enters the corpuscle and the efferent arteriole leaves it, right? So we looked in and out, right? So here we go, this area right in here. Okay. Let's see, and the urinary pole is the opposite side where we saw we were taking all the filtrate out, and we're going to start looking at the renal tubules. So the like proximal convoluted tubule is going to begin there. The renal or the uriniferous tubule is the duct that is leading away from the glomerulus, and it's going to actually be going to dip down into the tip of the medullary pyramid, like depending on which type of nephron you've got. It's divided into the four regions. So we have a proximal convoluted tubule. Think of it as the PCT, right? PCT, the loop of Henle, and then the distal convoluted tubule, which is going to be the DCT. So you'll see that a lot. We'll look at here in an image in just a minute. And then eventually, after we are completing that filtration process or managing the filtrate, it's going to leave via the collection duct. And right, so let's start with the proximal convoluted tubule, or the PCT. It's going to arise from the glomerular capsule. It's the longest and most coiled region, and it has a lot of the simple cuboidal epithelium is like going to kind of allow for the beginning of the absorption process, right? So especially with little microvilli sticking out. The nephron loop has a loop of Henle, which is the long U-shaped tube. Oh my gosh, I have to have a picture here. There we go. There it is. Okay. Oh no, I did a thing. Okay. So here what we have is, we talked about the glomerulus right here, proximal convoluted tubule going in here. This is that loop of Henle, right, or the nephron loop, and then here's that DCT, or the distal convoluted tubule, and we're going to take that filtrate out all the way from the collecting duct. Okay, so it's like we saw that a little bit, and let's just kind of go back and talk about it. Okay, there it is. Okay. The nephron loop, or the loop of Henle, is long, it's U-shaped, just as we saw. It kind of ducts down into the medullary part of the kidney. at each one of the pyramids. It has a descending limb and an ascending limb. The thick segments have a cuboidal epithelium, hence why they are thick. So these are actually going to be moving items in and out, especially since we have to pump in and out salts. We have to have a lot of mitochondria to help run those pumps with ATP. We also have a thinner segment that has a simple squamous epithelium. And so this one's going to be more about using osmosis to kind of manage the water content of the filtrate. And then finally, the final component is going to be the distal convoluted tubule, or the DCT. It's um, going to be the part that kind of connects right into the loop of Henle as it leaves the medullary component and moves into the cortex, or the cortical component. And it's shorter, it's less coiled. It kind of picks up a few of the last filtrate items before it leaves and enters the collecting duct, which receives this fluid, or the filtrate, from the distal convoluted tubules. And then it passes it right back into the medulla, or the medulla, sorry. And then lots of these collecting ducts are going to be meeting at the medullary pyramid. Things to also know, a papillary duct is formed by the merger of a bunch of these collecting ducts all together. Right. So again, here's kind of the flow of it. Glomerular capsule, we're going to extract, produce filtrate. So that is blood plasma in a nutshell, which is kind of squeezed out or allowed to kind of drain out through the podocytes into the capsular space and then out into the proximal convoluted tubule, because it's the closest one. That's why it's proximal. It runs through the nephron loop, and it goes through a variety of different like osmotic based or sometimes pumping action filtration steps. And then what is left is moved into the distal convoluted tubule after it goes through the nephron loop, or the loop of Henle, and that is going to pump out and maybe take up a little bit more water. It's kind of depending. And then the collection duct is where we are going to put all the processed filtrate, and that's going to flow to the papillary duct, the minor calyx, the major calyx, where it will flow out of the renal pelvis into the ureters, on its way down to the urinary bladder, and then out the urethra during urination. Okay, here again is that anatomy of the tube, right? So we looked at this. So let me go ahead and clear my pen markings. And let's just like do a highlight on the way, okay? So in here is the glomerulus, right? And so the corpuscle, it's also known as the renal corpuscle on the outside here. So we're going to process out a lot of the filtrate, and what we're going to do is we're actually going to extract blood plasma and kind of start that filtration process. And here's the proximal convoluted tubule, convoluted because it's all twisty and turny, proximal because it's the closest thing to the glomerulus. And so then we're going to dip down through the nephron loop, aka the loop of Henle, and we're going to get a little bit more into how the filtrate is processed in this area in a couple later lectures, because it's pretty complex, honestly. And then here's a less twisty but also convoluted still tubule, and it is the distal convoluted tubule because it's the furthest one from the glomerulus, the renal corpuscle. And then the filtrate that has been processed is going to move into the collection duct, going to the papillary duct as it intersects, right, with all of these other collecting ducts, and then moving its way all the way out through the renal pelvis, also ureters, and where it becomes urine. All right, that's good. Okay, let's see if it's going to let me turn the page. No? Okay. There it is. Okay. So let's talk about the different types of nephrons. So there's juxtamedullary and cortical types nephrons. We looked at those. So juxtamedullary are the ones that kind of like duck down, right, into the pyramid itself. And then we have these like cortical nephrons, which is like most of them, and they kind of like do their thing mostly above, right? So in the cortical region. So they're a little bit shorter, for example. Right, and so the process is slightly different, but not largely that different. Here's an image, right? So here you have, so this would be a pyramid. Think of that as this. This is where the medulla is. So juxtamedullary has the glomerulus, proximal convoluted tubule processing through the loop of Henle. Vasa recta is the vasculature that's going to be throughout the loop, which is very different from how it looks in the cortical nephrons. Just keep that's one major difference. And then the filtrate is going to be pushed out through the distal convoluted tubule into the into the collecting duct. So what's different with the cortical nephrons are a few things. Number one, instead of vasa recta, um, what we have like all of the vasculature is kind of up here a little bit more and really hits hard the proximal convoluted tubule, right? Here's the glomerulus itself again. So a lot shorter trip as the loop just barely touches the medulla itself before it bounces back up to distal convoluted tubule where it's surrounded by the peritubular capillaries, and then that filtrate is then also processed through that same collecting duct. So just like kind of a little difference. Main difference are going to be where the vasculature is, for sure, where the loop is, the nephron loop is. So those are kind of like the two main things like at this point to kind of keep a look at, right? Okay. So I hope that was helpful, and I know it's going to be a little bit complicated, but I will be here. And in the meantime, I hope you're out there somewhere having a great day. All right, bye-bye.